In the first half hour, she'll be joining us for the second half hour when we are joined with Professor McCanny. And we have lots of news to cover today. Let's start at the top because you do an amazing job. By the way, you've been in the past providing your Twiland blog with a donate button. It's my suggestion, of course, that you start a subscription where people actually subscribe and pay like $4 or $5 a month to get the blog. The information is that valuable and that unique and that important that they really should be supporting what you're doing. And I tell people, just like when they're buying all their nutraceuticals from us and not jumping around to advertisements they hear on my show or other networks, or if they see me over on Jeff's show and they hear about Carnivora or Ali C and other stuff. No, you want to buy our nutraceuticals to support what we're doing. You want to support Ann by buying and subscribing monthly to her blog, because if you do that, you're going to get top quality information you're not going to get from the newstainment media. You're going to get scientific validity with references, and you're going to hear information you're not going to hear elsewhere on other shows on this network or other networks, television or radio. So it's important for you to support what Ann's doing. So Ann, let's go through the news.
Well, okay. We've had a case of botulism. Now, that's very unusual. We haven't had an outbreak of botulism for a long time. In fact, on the blog, you're going to be able to see the last time we had one in Texas was 2001. So it's been 14 years since we had an outbreak of botulism in the United States. This outbreak was in Ohio. There were 29 cases and one death. And they're saying that they only had one death because it was an astute observation when that person went into the emergency room and they recognized the symptoms, and so they got the botulism toxin from the CDC. You know, this is not kept locally. It's kept at the CDC, and so it has to be flown in.
Right. Now, the typical ones I hear of botulism are, it's usually like a potluck supper where somebody's canned something a number of years previously and they didn't do it properly, and those canned meats or whatever had grown botulism toxin in the canned meats, and then it caused real problems. That's the usual story I hear.
Yes, well, this was potatoes that they had home canned, and they hadn't used a pressure cooker. They just used hot water.
If you have to use what's called a pressure cooker canner, and if you use the proper equipment, botulism just doesn't occur because you killed all of the anaerobic bacteria, and you're not able to produce the botulinum toxin. So, it's really simple to prevent if you have proper canning techniques and a proper pressure cooker canner, because when you're getting to 4 or 5 atmospheres of pressure at 300 or 400 degrees, it's like you're kidding. There's no bacteria going to survive that or spores. It dies.
Yeah, right. I was surprised to see on the list that in 1994 Texas had a case. 23 people were affected, and they had used baked potatoes were used in an eggplant dip. Now, I didn't think you could get botulism from baked potatoes, but I'll tell you one thing: I'm not eating any more twice baked potatoes. That was in a restaurant.
Twice baked potatoes, yeah. Well, the part of the problem is that they have to understand there's very simple techniques for making sure all bacteria are going. You don't have to go back to Semmelweis, who taught that you have to wash between doing autopsies and doing deliveries so you don't cause puerperal infections that kill women. And food preparation. A lot of the restaurants get shut down because they don't have proper food preparation procedures to make sure that they don't build up biotoxins, or they have waste material or fat around that can grow bacteria and then cause problems with contamination of their food.
Well, you know how restaurants do that. You've seen the baked potatoes sitting under an IR heat lamp. So, I think I'll just stay away from that altogether.
That's funny. Okay, so what's the next big story?
Well, Legionnaire's disease, there's been 7 people that have died from Legionnaire's disease in the Bronx, New York, and New York City. And I was disappointed in the report. The report was written by the CDC, but they did not explain how they blamed what they blamed were the cooling towers for the air conditioning systems. Well, the cooling towers, they're covered with water, from the air. So, and then that drips into a drip pan. But the botulism is inside. It's in the inside, the plumbing for the pipes for the hot
Yeah,
water.
it's actually getting the plumbing. In fact, if they sampled the plumbing tubes, you see it chronically growing inside the plumbing itself of the building. We see it in hospitals. We see it in big institutions that are old. And Legionella should actually be something that they periodically sample the water of the main plumbing systems of these big buildings, like hospitals especially, because Legionella can be carried in by someone, and then when it gets in their plumbing, it's going to stay there, and it colonizes throughout the plumbing system.
Well, they didn't say that there had been maintenance on the cooling towers, but that's the only way that I can see that the Legionella would have gotten out of the piping and into the drip pan for the cooling tower.
I have a simple solution. Number one, put ultraviolet lights around the cooling air conditioning units. Put Nutridyne into the main water supply to knock off the pathogens, which will kill everything. Much better than chloramine and not toxic to your mitochondria. And periodically sample the water to make sure it doesn't have spores or other bacteria trying to grow in blood agar plates and regular plates. And do a scanning electron microscopy to look for mycelia of fungi and others, because it's toxigenic mold that grow in a lot of buildings, and they can be in the plumbing systems. And most people aren't aware that 1/4 of homes and 1/3 of commercial buildings have got chronic mold infections, either in the building materials themselves or the plumbing systems or the plenum chambers of air conditioning units. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. They don't realize that mold fungi have vomitoxins and cancer-inducing toxins, as well as neurotoxins that can affect behavior and your mind. So it's not a minor thing. And, of course, you go to environmental clinics, like the top one is the Dallas Environmental Clinic with Dr. William Ray. He's the top expert of these kind of things. And they do all kinds of tests that can prove that you have mold hypotoxicity to molds. They can send environmental experts into your home or building and show that there's a lot of buildings that should be condemned. And of course that's why a lot of environmental and we call integrative medical doctors are under persecution from the regular medical profession, occupational medicine, because a lot of work sites are extremely dangerous with airborne heavy metals, airborne bacteria and fungi, airborne dust from, say, bagazosis and other materials that are actually from towers where they have wheat or corn. And a lot of people aren't aware that these things are not only explosive, but they're also very toxic to people. And they grow mold and other toxins that can be really deadly to you. Give you cancer.
I agree with you, and in fact, I put that in my home air conditioning system. I put in the ultraviolet band C lights, and it made a big difference.
Oh yeah, you put an ultraviolet band C light in there.
My face was no longer swollen from.
And what I would do is put in the water chamber, have a little drip system with Nutridyne in there, dilute the Nutridyne, and have it dripping into your water system. For your air conditioning units, and you'll never grow mold or fungus or anything. It'll just kill it all.
And I did like the disclaimer that they put into their study. It says, this study was not designed to analyze effects of conversion from chlorine to chloramines on outcomes other than Legionella. So there are health effects that occur when water companies convert from chlorine to chloramine, and they don't usually own up to that. In other words, people get sick afterwards, and they don't tell them it's because the water has changed.
Well, Legionella is resistant to regular chlorine or chloramine, and so is amoeba, amoebiasis, and other pathogens that get in, like cryptosporidium or other types of parasites. They're pretty well resistant to chloramine and chlorine. I think they swim in it. I think it's
biofilm that lines the pipes.
Yeah. It doesn't kill them. I think the bugs think it's vitamins.
I think so too.
Yeah. Back in a minute. So amoeba is dangerous if you're swimming off the little jump areas in Florida. Remember, amoebiasis can get to your nasal cavities and get into your brain real fast. So, and you're talking about the conversion of chlorine to monochloramine and the residual disinfectant, and of course the trihalomethane compounds in drinking water, which are increased by converting to chloramines instead of chlorine. And chloramines are 100,000 times more likely to form DNA adducts than even chlorine, which means it's nasty for cross-linking your DNA and causing DNA adducts that can cause cancer, autoimmune diseases, and of course, when it suppresses your immune cells, your granulocytes, it makes you a sitting duck for stealth pathogens.
Well, that's not good. They didn't tell us that when they put it in the drinking water.
Well, even if you talk to them, and I say, what I like to do is call up people like the water board guys. I just recently had to talk to two of the engineers of the Vista Irrigation District here in North County, San Diego. I said, now, I'm Dr. Bill Deagle, but consider me a polymath, which means I absorb the knowledge of all the other specialties I've been involved with, including water engineers and scientists and people working in nuclear plants, etc. So I'm going to ask you, and pretend you're you're doing the verbal portion of your master's or PhD level thesis before you get certified by the board. And this is going to be tough questions. And I started firing the questions at them. I said, man, you're not kidding. I said, yeah, you're not doing very well on this exam, by the way. and I was asking them engineering questions, geology questions about primary water and so on. And what I realized is that, believe it or not, you know the primary reason why water board people put fluoride in the water is to make sure the pipes don't calcify and cause them to end up breaking. They don't do it for the people to make sure you have nice hard enamel, which is stupid. And the dentists, by the way, that wanted to support this, the enamelocytes that form enamel are damaged and destroyed by fluoride. It doesn't make your teeth nice and hard. It destroys the enamelocytes, so you lose the connective tissue, the collagen, that holds the enamel together. Because remember, just like bone, 42% of the dry weight is a type 29 collagen, a special matrix. The same with the enamelocytes that lay down bone and the enamel of your teeth, which is a hardness just under diamond. And people don't realize, your teeth are getting more dense, but if you did an x-ray or whatever, but they're more fragile. So you're not making better enamel, you're destroying the enamelocytes by putting fluoride on. And, craziness is what it is. It's craziness. And, when a dentist who's not a biological dentist tries to defend a fluoridated, putting fluoride in children's teeth, or putting mercury silver amalgams, I beat them up intellectually, and I don't leave any victims. I terminate them intellectually so they realize they're intellectually dead at the end of the discussion.
Well,
that's important. It's important to get taught.
Drinking water.
Well, yeah, and the problem is I tell people if you don't have a pure water system, don't think of Berkey or a distillation system, because a lot of times the distillate will go on the other side of the distillation system. So our pure water system is the only one that will create clear water. And if you think, bottled water is good, no, a lot of the bottled water containers contain bisphenol A and other plasticizing agents. Yeah. Or they put up to 400 parts per million, and of course all the PepsiCo and other bottling companies, most of them actually have 400 parts per million of fluoride in the water. That's the standard.
Oh, I didn't know that. How about beer?
A lot of other beers and water are using water that has fluoride and other things. There was a problem back in the 60s where a company making a big head on the beer added bromine, because it really made a big head on the beer in Quebec City because they have a lot of beer there, and it caused people to go into fulminating hepatic failure.
Oh, my goodness.
So a lot of people who went into fulminating failure, because the Quebecers, they're not going to drink one or two beer after they've been up in the north and they've been having maple syrup and whatever, pancakes and bacon and whatever they're going to eat, and then they're having sloshing that night with a dozen beer. Their liver's saying, "I'm seeing you later, bud. See you in Hades."
Yeah. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about this Volnia. I'm saying that wrong. Vibrio marinus.
Vibrio marinus. In fact, that's my research project I did work on when marine bacteriology before I went into medicine was on Vibrio. It is the primary way that Chondrus crispus polysaccharides, the 3-O-methyl groups, are converted to make it edible to other sea life. It's also a very toxigenic bacteria, and it can also be concentrated by filter feeding things like scallops and oysters and mussels. And it can kill you. If you get a Vibrio septicemia, it can kill you.
Well, that's what happened to a Virginia man who went wading in a river in Virginia, and apparently it was kind of brackish. He stepped on something and made a cut in his leg. The wound became infected. His leg had to be amputated, and he died anyway. This is a really serious thing. So people...
Well, the problem is the doctors are always going to, with their narrow medical cap on, they're going to think of gram-negative septicemia or looking for other things. But the problem is they don't realize there's usually what I call pathogen soup, especially when there's an entry point in a wild area like a pond or, a mud area or out in a little, jumping off the board. You're thinking, that water looks good, it's brackish, but it's okay. And it's got amoebiasis and Vibrio marinus growing and all kinds of parasites like Cryptosporidium and others, and these organisms are not killed off by typical antibiotics. They just look at it like, oh, that's vitamins, man. That's good. And if they get in your bloodstream and they migrate to your brain, they're going to form like amoebic abscesses in your brain or liver. And Vibrio marinus just will whip right through your arteries and give you, put you in a cardiogenic shock in a matter of a couple of days. Just like most people that die in the ICU don't die of gram-negative septicemia. I did research when I worked in the ICU back at the University of Calgary, and I did a big study that reviewed all this. In fact, most people that die of a traumatic injury or burn die of fungal septicemia. It's the fungi that kill you. They actually form plugs that actually block your arteries off to your brain and your heart and can give you a cardiac arrest. It's fungi that grow. Gram-negative is just the secondary bugs. The ones that kill you are fungi.
Yeah, it's called a fungal bloom. Is that right?
Right. That fungal bloom in your arteries, when your immune system goes south, the fungi take over your body. Remember, they're already ready trying to digest you, but remember, like ducks, they don't have teeth, so they take a while to kill you, but they kill you fast because they grow like crazy. And that's why if you don't use antifungals in the ICU, by the way, doctors out there listening, if you have somebody that's going to cardiogenic shock, don't think it's gram-negative septicemia or something else. It's a fungal bloom, and if you don't use antifungals like caspofungin and so on, and our antipathogenics, Nutridyne, Allicin, Silver. In fact, we had Mexican doctors that had this gentleman who was dying. It's actually our cleaner's father, who at the time was in his late 80s, a couple of years ago, and he's now over 90. And doctors in Mexico used the intravenous form. They literally put our Silver 100 in intravenous, and an hour later he was walking around recovering instead of dying. So you have to understand, Silver will kill it, Allicin Med will kill it, and the most powerful of all, Nutrimedical will kill anything, including Asteroides lumbricoides. It'll kill off parasites. It'll kill off the schizon parasites and malaria, even if it's in your brain and you're in a coma. It's amazing what Nutrimedical will do.
Okay, I need to catch you up on the jet stream because the end of the half hour is almost here. The jet stream is lackadaisical. It's not blowing very fast any place. The fastest it's growing is across the northern Atlantic. And there's a piece of it that is coming into Southern California and may bring in some moisture to Southern California, and then that moisture will go up to Montana, North Dakota, and then come back down towards Missouri.
Boy, is that ever a weird jet stream, the way you described it. That's amazing.
Well, you can see it on the...
Yeah, you're a pretty brilliant guy. One of the things you mentioned is you could simply go along in a F-150 pickup and use a chemical laser and aim it at the clouds, and when you create an electron chain between the cloud and the ground, you're going to get a stream of electrons going to the ground and a stream of plasma going up, so you create a high pressure, you create a low pressure system, so you could actually start the rain to fall. Yes. What's happening is, Ann just mentioned before the break that the jet streams have been screwed up, that really is not normally coming back at all. So we have geoengineering of the climate going on, and I call the killers in control, people like, the National Security Agency, the United Nations, and I actually spent an entire evening with a physicist who actually presented the World Constitution Parliament Association 1958 to the United Nations, and they were talking about geoengineering the climate because he knew that I was actually taking care of pilots flying out of Buckley and Peterson and Aurora. So my classified information is not secondhand like a lot of people on this network and elsewhere try to quote each other. I actually worked with these guys, and I had one of them who, once he got disclosed the information, they killed him. Okay, so it's one of our mechanics working on our Black Hawk helicopters and our Hercules C-130s. So people need to know I know the science backward and forward and the plasma physics of exactly how these maniacs are doing it. And there are groups actually trying to fight it, just like there was a group trying to fight the pinwheel control of the plasma interferometry moving the storm system directly over Katrina to cause even more destruction at New Orleans. So it wasn't just the government messing around. There were other, we call good guys, I call the white hats, we're actually trying to counteract the government-sponsored geoengineering and climatic and storm system terrorism, which is what's going on when the storms hit New Jersey shore, where they hit Katrina. People need to be aware that the drying out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, North Korea, and these other Muslim countries is all a weather warfare already going on against these countries. And,
including, by the way, the recent apparent, and I haven't confirmed this, but many asteroid strikes in Iran have been what I interpret as the U.S. government's lightning rod program.
Tell us about that, because
simulation of asteroid strikes.
Now, of course, here's the other thing people need to be aware. 95% of our weapon systems are on space-based weapon platforms are aimed out in space to redirect the trajectory of near space objects. And simply put, all you need to do is you need to direct a high-energy, what's called directed energy weapon system at an asteroid or comet at a very large distance from the Earth, and if you change it just even a tenth of a degree, it will literally miss the planet. And you can have a fairly large object with a very tiny force on it, and it'll change its trajectory enough you can actually aim it toward a specific area of the Earth's surface if you want to.
Great, exactly. You can do the opposite.
And you can do the opposite. You can actually then use we call asteroid and comet warfare, where it appears all of a sudden a bunch of comets and asteroids are striking Iran because they actually can redirect the trajectory of like the Perseid meteor shower, which of course is the one that just passed, which you can tell they messed around with the Perseid shower and they actually redirected some of these to land in the territory of Iran, didn't they?
Well, the other thing is they have a program. There's a couple different names for it. I call it the lightning rod program. The other term is rods from God. And
the Rods from God program is one that I know about, which are actually depleted uranium rods that are about a meter long that are put through what's called a linear accelerator tubes in space-based weapon platforms, and they strike the Earth at about 23,000 miles an hour, and they're such high-speed impact they cause a nuclear explosion that's similar to a small nuclear bomb, and they come in so quickly there's no thermal signature as they approach the Earth at 23,000 miles an hour. So that's the actual Rod for God program that they actually have in space as part of U.S. weapons. Space weapons systems are up there.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's hard to tell anymore if an asteroid is real or one of those.
The Rod for God will do the same thing because it'll cause an explosion that's virtually identical. These rods are relatively small. They're about 1.5 inches across of depleted uranium. That's all they are. And they're actually accelerated with an accelerator tube weapon in space. And they can get pretty accurate in terms of where they want to hit, because if traveling at that speed, even though the Earth is rotating, they can hit within a relatively small area of territory.
Right. And the other thing they talked about is the amazing amount of destruction where these hit. And typically, even with a fairly good-sized asteroid, it just makes a hole in the ground, like the one in Winslow, Arizona, was a pretty good-sized chunk of rock. Even what's left is pretty good size, and it's a hole maybe a mile across, in the ground, and and the energy is absorbed locally. Right. So it's not like a nuclear explosion. So some of the signatures you can tell the difference that it was man-made, not.
Well, there's going to be three things about a rod from God. The first is you're going to get a neutron flux, because the depleted uranium causes a neutron flux. You could see if you had some kind of way of monitoring that. You're going to get an electromagnetic pulse, and you're going to get a vapor cloud of depleted uranium above the site. So if you had sensors downwind, you could actually pick it up.
Or even at the site afterwards, you could go around and it would be in the ground. It would be everywhere.
Right.
And so, you could determine if this was man-made.
Right.
But anyway, your original point was that you were talking about the Katrina and the other methods of causing damaging what appear to be natural effects.
Right.
Done by the insane people in charge.
Right, and of course the insane people in our government. I mean, we spent a few $100 million on the Iron Dome and Green Pine radar system for Israel, and these Israelis are being duped because they've been taking an order for 600 Patriot missiles, which didn't exist because the U.S. government jumped over that technology and went to theater air defense, which is much more advanced but still deficient. I asked the guys at the White Sands Missile Base, because I was their doctor when they're doing missile tests at the Vandenberg and White Sands Missile Base in New Mexico, And they said it would take to 2045 and $73 trillion with a T before they got 100% strike. So they were creating what's called a plasma interferometry zone in the upper troposphere, so that when a missile system came back on reentry, they can knock out its guidance system using interferometry technology. And they also had space-based weapon systems that had to hit them with high-energy, directed energy weapons in the upper atmosphere. And they were testing them on large Boeing jets. They also had on space-based weapon platforms. The problem is, with the number of missiles and evadance systems, the Russians can completely evade our systems, especially with low hypersonic cruise missiles skimming the ocean water shoved out of the back of a Bear bomber. So every system that we have, no matter how fancy and expensive, cannot stop Russia from frying every one of our cities within half an hour. So much idiots, you can't do a damn thing, and I know the technology backward and forward, and I have a lot of classified contacts, and what I see happening is pure insanity. And of course, Obama's comments, literally allowing Erdogan to start doing an air campaign against Syria, guarantees, in the words of Putin, that he will turn Syria into the Stalingrad for Erdogan and the little Hitlers, including Obama, who's a maniac. And of course, he's going to try to sit there and talk about peace on September 13th, 2 days after 9/11, and Mr. Putin is just calling it straight. They're trying to pull Russia into a nuclear war, and Russia, China, and Iran are not going to allow them to destroy Syria.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what's going on, and the world is a very different place. Economically, the United States is failing. Putin pulled some trump cards, and he knows what's going on. Obama is like a sandlot basketball player against the whole team of the Golden.
Oh yeah. Putin is like a super genius of IQ 200 plus, and Obama's like a high school kid that tries to show he's narcissistic but has a marginal IQ and never goes to class.
Yeah, that's about the exact position. Yeah,
not a good situation. So we have a narcissistic, gum-chewing fool in the White House who's evil as hell, trying to come against powerful nations that have laid their line in the sand and said, don't cross this line, bad things will happen.
Yeah, but you remember that Obama is middle management.
Yeah, I know that. He's just a pawn, a Punch and Judy punching bag for the New World Order. Anyway, we talked briefly about the karatbar system, and of course I want to talk to both of you more about this, because I really think it's a business that will help benefit both of you, but also a lot of our people. Here at Nutrimedical, we are providing Nutrimedical solutions to get your health back, spiritual solutions to get your spiritual relationship with the Most High God back, financial solutions to create an alternative credit economy back, the wing generator, which is replacement energy. This is not alternative energy. This will replace nuclear, coal, and everything. 83 to 90% of the world's airborne pollution is caused by dirty coal used in China, Indonesia, Malaysia, period. And even the pollution here in America, we significantly reduced the airborne pollution, but a lot of the power, I think it's 65 or 70% of the power is generated by coal. A lot of our coal is relatively good. It's anthracite coal from Wyoming and so on, and we use scrubbers and so on, which, by the way, they don't use a damn thing in China. The amount of pollution coming out in cities like Beijing is insane. And you can literally go to park your car in Beijing and these other big cities like Shandong, and you can have a quarter inch of rubber dust or a black dust on your car within an afternoon. It's that bad. So people need to be aware that the wing generator program is the solution, and a number of thousands of these would literally replace all of the power systems, give us a new type of grid system, and replace that. So this, the 13 horsepower system. You have the video up now. Professor McKinney, tell us about the wing generator, and then I want to get into the encryption, because I want to see, as this year closes, a big network of people that get into karatbars. Eventually, it's not just going to be a gold savings club, it's going to be converted to a currency system, and vendors will start accepting it at full value. And then we're going to start seeing encrypted bartering that no government or NSA agency in any country can then break that encryption code and interfere with our commerce or enslave us to an economic system, which Janet Yellen's talking about, and they've had this we call wet dream of the globalists to get rid of cash. So every currency transaction, including you're giving your son or daughter $20, would be under the great eye of the system and the beast.
Right, exactly. So this is something, much of the world has already broken away from the world banks. They're in a real world of hurt. And so they're not doing real well. Well,
that's why we're in a pre-mark of the beast system. Remember when Janet Yellen announces this, that she's wanting to get rid of interest, the only way they can keep the interbank rate, which is the LIBOR rate, and we already know they're corrupt criminals and got a minor slap on the wrist in the last few years. We have one of our listeners actually did research on LIBOR as an investigator, and we read that in the first hour. People need to be aware that if we need to create an alternative economic system, and we had G. Edward Griffin on, he'll be back on the program. He was on twice this week with our expert Pete Fettig on the karatbars, and our upline, of course, is Ted Anderson here at Genesis Network. They need to be aware that an encrypted bartering system that allows you to create credit so you can buy and sell without tax, without interference, without surveillance by the government. By the way, we want to make illegal activities illegal. Like, no, you're not going to have prostitution, drugs, and illegal activity occurring. But the system would allow you to buy and sell across state and government lines around the world and sell intellectual property, physical property, and so on. And we need full encryption to do that. And you have the system available for that, don't you, Professor?
Yeah. The system also can be used for voter verification.
Right, which means we have direct democracy. Yeah, we need to have direct democracy, which means in every country on earth. And it's interesting, we don't have a democratic system, although they call it for voting for the president. We vote for the electoral college. We do not vote for the president. People don't realize that. We vote for the electoral college.
No, nobody's ever voted in a president or won, as they say. Right. Candidate one is just a hoax to make the American public think that somehow they vote for president or anybody.
I call it a selection. It's not an election. It's called selection. It's just like the vote, like the
local level.
Yeah, it's all scam. I call it scamtastic. It's the same thing when you go to court and they want to have a jury board, and of course they do the psychological profiling so they get the jury they want, so they can manipulate the psychology of the board to get the outcome that the psychologists and the lawyers who train in all these psychological tactics can manipulate. It's the same thing. We have administrative law. We don't have sovereign law. Everything is a lie. Whether it's we call public religion, public law, public politics, public corporate behavior, it's all just a lie.
Yep, exactly. But the issue of encryption, what I have is a system that cannot be broken because it changes every time.
Right.
It's a system in which, in fact, the person unwittingly, when they send their message or do whatever they're doing, they actually create the encryption system anew every time. So there's no way to advance, figure it out or whatever.
You can't go and put 100 hours of NSA supercomputer Cray 4 computers or Cray 5 gallium arsenide and break the code because you figured out the prime number sequence arrays and clusters in order to break the code. You can't. It's not breakable.
It's not breakable. And so anyway, when we release this, it is something that should have been in place a long time ago, but that'll also give us real government, where the idea that, or in the Ukraine, for example, the Eastern European nations got together, and they literally talk about the U.S. government as the Nazis, and because they literally are, they're the carryover from the World War II Nazis. That's where.
Well, if you look actually at the CIA, and if you actually go to Quantico, Virginia, and you actually look at the facilities in San Diego, they're actually made in the Nazi symbol, which is the ancient symbol that goes back to Asia over 5,500 years ago, which is the ancient symbol of the sun, which was the same as the Nazi symbol of the Society of the Bell and the Thule Gesellschaft in Germany. People don't understand this. They think, well, what's that mean? These people worship transdimensional entities, and they actually would channel them and actually then go back to the lab to prove that they had. So they were using things like plasma physics of the circulating plasma of mercury to create an anti-gravitonic Higgs field, and this is back before the Second World War, so they had Foo Fighters. They're using anti-gravitonics back in the 1940s. People say, no, they can't do that. I said, well, they did. I took care of British pilots that actually chased these Foo Fighters that just went blam right out of sight. And by the way, they were not space aliens. They were Germans. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the breaking of these entities, right now there's, which country was it? They're looking for one of the Rothschilds. He's in hiding. And they have a warrant out for his arrest. So there's some countries are starting to close in on them. Russia.
Well, look at George Soros. He's considered a criminal. He's been, raiding currencies in Russia and Britain and elsewhere. He's actually the primary person supporting NAMBLA and Black Lives Matter with Jay-Z and Beyonce Knowles. I mean, people don't understand the evil people that are infiltrating. And one of the primary mentors and backers of Obama is George Soros, and of course Zbigniew Brzezinski, and of course he has a sugar daddy in Saudi Arabia, giving them billions. In fact, the sugar daddy that paid for his Columbia University, which is all scamtastic, because this is the Photoshop kid, Obama. I mean, nothing in his life is real. It's all Photoshopped, because he's deep black op. I mean, that's what he is. And
so the key to this, like you're saying, you start a program, you develop it, and then this program can grow. And as people become more successful, that's why they were so afraid. And I've said this publicly before.
right.
The James Jones mass murder was not a suicide; it was a mass murder, and the Heaven's Gate mass murder were because of the groups that were forming that were actually succeeding.
Well, they were computer techies, weren't they? Wasn't the Heaven's Gates a bunch of techies?
The term Heaven's Gate is what the term they used for their encryption and software, which was used for firewalls and secure transmission.
Right.
The government couldn't break into it, and they told them, you got to stop doing this, and they didn't. They kept working and selling it internationally. They were competing against Promise Software. A guy named Bill Hamilton out of California was in charge of that, the same guy that ran the Skywatch program, and his wife, Nancy Leader, who became Nancy Leader in the whole PSYOPs operation of Planet X.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Planet X scammed to the scamtastic side, trying to fiddle it around, right? And of course, the Promise Software is the basis for the National Security Agency and the seamless BEAST system for making every database on Earth seamless to NSA. So that's why I've said before, the National Security Agency is not a national security. It's industrial espionage, 90%. That's the words right out of the mouth of a senior NSA agent 20 years ago. NSA is industrial and intercontinental espionage to other countries like Germany, whatever. But guess what? The Russians have encryption technology too, just like yours, Professor, that is completely unbreakable. So, Edgar Casey's prophecy about how freedom will come out of Russia is going to come true.